How do you beat a domestic violence case? This is Christina Williams with Just Criminal Law.
And David Mann, legal storytelling specialist. Well, if anyone knows how to beat a domestic violence case, it would be you. So what's the first thing someone should do?
Sure, the first thing that someone should do is hire an attorney. And then we can look at the 4 ways we beat a domestic violence charge. And that first one is going to be showing the motive of the alleged victim to exaggerate or fabricate, meaning blow things out of proportion or just flat out say something happened one way when it didn't.
So how do you show somebody's motivation to do something like that?
Well, you look at the relationship of the parties. So a good indication is, is there maybe accusations of infidelity? That is, the defendant's accused of cheating on the alleged victim, and she wants to get him in trouble as retribution. Or maybe the couple's going through a divorce and there's going to be a custody battle. So these type of scenarios have it inherently built in that the alleged victim is going to perhaps exaggerate or fabricate.
Okay, so that can count in the defendant's favor. You said there were 4, so that's one. What's another one?
Well, the next one we have to look at is the investigation. How was it done? A lot of times with these cases, what we're dealing with is confirmation bias, and that's a fancy way of saying that the police think, because it's a man and a woman, that the man is guilty of whatever the woman says happened or occurred. And so we have to look at, was that the conclusion? Did they really dig in and determine who was the primary aggressor? That is, who of the two was primarily responsible for the physical confrontation.
And sometimes they make mistakes with that, right?
Yes, they do, because a lot of times say the woman calls 911, she's chomping at the bit, so to speak, to talk to the police when they get there. And a lot of times men just inherently aren't going to complain about, maybe all of the circumstances that led to the woman calling the police. They're just a lot of times less likely to, want to come forth with, what happened. Maybe she was physically assaulting him. He's not going to complain about that. And so a lot of times, the investigation, we just don't get both sides of the stories at that initial police contact when an arrest is made.
All right, so that's 2 of them. What is the main third thing that you consider to avoid a domestic violence charge?
Right. So I kind of alluded to it. We look at, is this in fact a case of self-defense? That is, who threw the first blow? Was the physical portion of the client's contact with the alleged victim to try to prevent himself from continuing to be assaulted, or to try to leave the scene, that is, exit the residence? I've seen cases where, that's in fact the case, but none of that is even discussed in that initial investigation, because, again, law enforcement is thinking, we see, some sort of injury perhaps with the alleged victim, but, there's not that same injury with the defendant, but he was in fact being attacked. And I just had a jury verdict where, the parents who were divorcing, were in fact fighting over money still, and the alleged victim wanted the defendant to give her a check and wasn't going to let her have the child until the defendant gave her that check. And so he bent down to, pick up the young son, and the alleged victim hit him over the head, and he just went back on his heels and threw up his forearm in order to protect himself, as she was coming down and ended up hitting her eyebrow. And so that bled a lot and it looked terrible. But in the meantime, there was all sorts of evidence that his glasses were knocked off his head. His cap was on the ground at the bottom of the stairs. He had a scratch on his nose. But, he didn't complain about that and ended up getting arrested. And when we went to trial, the jury came back with a not guilty verdict in about 10 minutes.
Wow. All right. Well, that brings me to my next question is, once it all goes to trial, are there things that can happen during the trial that can help avoid a domestic violence charge?
Yes, so we're able to really allow the other side of the story to come out. And again, a lot of times, the prosecutor is just not interested in hearing what it is that we have to say to try to avoid trial. And so we have to go to trial and we have to put on witnesses and evidence. And sometimes we're even able to get the alleged victim to recant her statement and, admit, in that situation, I was the first one to attack. And when that happens, we can actually get the alleged victim to sign what we call an affidavit of non-cooperation. So when you're going to trial, sometimes that victim is just not going to cooperate with the state. And we've had plenty of success in that situation. But as you're preparing for trial, the state does need that victim, and sometimes the victim just moves. That is, they're not available. The state has not stayed in contact with them. They don't issue a subpoena for them, and it's time for trial, and they just haven't prepared, and they can't get their complaining witness to show up. We've gotten many cases dismissed because the state just didn't do their due diligence, and the witness was not available.
So it sounds like so many things, that if someone is accused of a domestic violence charge, in that moment, the very first thing they should do is call you. So they need to be able to get a hold of you, and how do they do that?
Sure. We'll include a link in the description where they can call, text, or chat with a member of my team anytime, day or night. Here at Just Criminal Law, we know you only get one shot at justice. So make yours count.